Welcome everyone to another breaking news. People following the vintage and retro theme probably have seen and heard it already, not only Itanium but also PCM, Wi-Fi drivers, 386 previously Spark version 7, but regularly other stuff, and vintage GPU drivers to be deleted. I find it a total dishonest disgrace, as you probably could have imagined from my previous videos. And here's why. So these days, I just today realized, testing our necessities for gracious and superior open source living and Linux and stuff, right? PowerPC and stuff, I realized Airport doesn't work anymore. Worked last month, it doesn't work. And it turns out, yes, even Apple Airport of Orinoco, PIO, ISA, PCMCIA devices with extra bus interface connection, PCI, card bus mini PCIe from a few pre-2002 Apple Power Mac variants, support both wireless extension, whatnot. These devices used to be one of the most common, so they even admit in the, like Arndt Bergman, thanks for deletion, signed off there. This devices also used to be one of the most commonly used ones 20 years ago, but have been orphaned most of the time. Yeah. And so the craziest stuff is, of course, what every sane person would do. I've been there, I've done that, you name A. We have NeoFetch for PowerBook 3.5 Tiebook. Perfectly, you could, like, literally, if you wanted, you could just use this machine for everything, right? I mean, it even has a freaking probably 16:10 amazing screen and Radeon isolated graphics and stuff. PowerPC at 867 megahertz. And of course, I restored it, right? We undelete Itanium. We undeleted this now. And the crazy stuff, right? This patch from September 17th merged there. This Linux, so this is already deleted. The ship has basically sailed. It's deleted, and Linux 6.8. Yet I just, like, what crazy people do. Here's to the crazy ones. The right, Square. What is it? I should have this. This should be my basically desktop background. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, T2 Linux for the crazy ones. The misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs and the square holes, the ones who see things differently and want their precious vintage and retro stuff just working. They are not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the only things you can't do is ignore them, because we will just revert those patches. May I present to you, and the sad thing is now we just released T2, the most amazing, some call it the 42 of T2 releases, the last Linux distribution you will ever need. The Linux distribution that undeletes Itanium, that undeletes Apple Airport, and they say it is too difficult to maintain, yet it just reverts. It freaking just works. Airport, hardware, station, firmware. IEEE, standard, yes, just web, but there you have that, right? 689, freaking Airport. And I will not stop there. So why is this? So this is absolutely, it is an absolute lie. It's a disgrace. It's a dishonesty, and it triggers me. It makes me depressive. It takes all the open source fun and life out of me, because I came from a time 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 20 years ago, where this shit was hard work and labor, right? And like other people, they worship, they maintain their classic cars, their museums, their landmarks, their monuments, standing off the shoulder of those, right? And it is an absolute lie that it takes too much effort to maintain, because, like, means they just work, don't touch the shit, but I hear you, you want to desperately change APIs, you want to desperately break APIs. It's the Linux kernel foundation stuff there. the only constant is change and regressions. That is your way of thinking. I got that already early on 20 years ago. This is why I never joined the Linux kernel more proper, because I find it mostly a total waste of lifetime and work resources. But the truth is also, if you just rename some API, if you just remove some parameter, if you just rename some struct, you just tree-wide SED this stuff, stream editor, SED, Perl, Python, all your regular expression goodness. It's an absolute lie that this saves anyone's what's not. In contrast, it turns people away from Linux, right? We came from a time when these drivers didn't work, when these drivers had to be reverse engineered, when no company would release specifications, when standing off the shoulder of giants, people reverse engineered were harassing companies to get at least partial specifications out of them, where countless of developer years were spent to make those drivers work, where it took years to stabilize. Remember how unstable Wi-Fi was in the early, like how unstable USB was, how unstable graphic drivers were, 3D acceleration, Wi-Fi drivers. It took years of bug hunting in the single address space monolithic kernel, where every Wi-Fi driver and human interface controller could crash your kernel. It took decades to get this working and perfect, and people to finally switch to Linux. And then, how dare you coming a decade later and just delete everything you don't like? If you don't like it, don't touch it. If you don't, I mean, also you don't need to constantly break stuff, right? This is also the third or whatnot wireless API, because obviously we need to reinvent the encryption key setup and SSID setup, so complex you need to reinvent the wheel every decade. Amazing. And I recurrently prove this point, right? Not only Itanium mostly reverts, the one additional regression that they artificially inserted, our small team of 3 Itanium developers also found relatively quickly. We would have found it earlier if we would have opened our eyes more, but that is because it wasn't the commit message, deleting some special memory allocation thing for only used by Itanium. But yeah, nonetheless, you can automatically bisect that. So Itanium, not only Itanium, still working in 6.8 and 6.9 release candidate as undeleted by us. Even Airport, and this is not the only one, right? There are multiple more drivers, and I think, I mean, sure, if you want to delete all this stuff and Debian and Arch and Gentoo and all the other 2000 Linux distributions don't care, then so be it. Then T2 will be one day the only Linux distribution where everything just works, and like even Red Hat artificially deleting even only 8-year-old serial attached SCSI ZAS drivers because they don't want to support them. Sure, if IBM's Red Hat business wants to release an enterprise Linux distribution where even relatively modest last gen stuff doesn't work anymore because they don't want, then well, but the only problem is it's extra work, right? Maintaining it out of tree, I just said it's next to no work. Of course, if some networking API core maintainer changes some networking API, it is way easier for them to tree-wide substitute than for me and you and our co-developers and our increasing community of vintage retro and just hardware-loving people to replicate this out of tree, right? Because it takes some weeks or months to realize, to rebuild what we do for PS3, Itanium, O2. And then we need to do this also for PCMCIA drivers. And then some websites hail this as a win. This is not a win. This is a lose, right? Like, I totally don't understand the concept of how deleting good, fine, curated, yes, C, and I hear you, C and stuff. But hey, the whole Linux kernel is C. Do you want to delete all of it? Because there are bugs and stuff every other corner found every day. What the crazy stuff is that some news sites hail this as, yay, the Linux kernel is lighter and less to maintain. It's like due. The AMD GPU driver is like 10 times larger than all the stuff deleted. The Novo driver is 10 times larger than all the stuff deleted. This is the vintage code is the smallest because least features, more simple and stuff. Like this is the tiniest, teeniest little, and this is drivers. This is not core stuff. This is like, it changes your latest and greatest mainstream x86 and high performance stuff. Totally not at all. Neither security nor performance, because this driver code is simply not freaking loaded, right? PCMCIA start to be like, usually with some news sites like, yay, that is amazing. Yeah, also Arndt Bergman, like, I don't know what, like, do they get bribed by Microsoft to distort? Like, for me, this is a destruction of the open source world, of deleting everything we stand for. Also, a decade ago, 20 years ago, we were laughing at Microsoft. They don't support all hardware anymore, but Linux can. Like, yeah, if you have maintainers, if you have co-maintainers like those who just live there, you know what, imagine, like, I would take a salary from some company of, my salary is like, we clean up the Linux kernel by deleting everything. Like, that is the opposite of making the Linux ecosystem and desktop great. 4000 driver, whatnot. Drivers is here, but drop support for 16-bit PCM devices, couple slots will hopefully get a lot easier. It's like, dude, it was working, it's implemented, like, you just don't need to touch it. Can you not just leave it there? And I mean, I read this, I read this news, but like, only I didn't quite realize, I thought like, maybe eventually in a year or two they delete Apple AirPort, like, but they've already, like, also, nobody here was screaming. It's like, yeah, I thought that, but what does it help that I always scream on Linux kernels? They will delete anyway, right? And then users, I mean, I'm a core developer, so I noticed that soonish. It's not like I read every mail on Linux kernel. I have YouTube videos to live stream. So the next users will only realize in a year or two with the next Debian release of whenever they ship something like that. And then it's like, dude, next gen Debian doesn't even have network on all the iBooks and PowerBooks anymore. So PCMCIA, Wi-Fi, how is this progress? Like, how is it? And other people, there is a huge community. Like I just came here, Berlin, Kurfürstendamm, there is classic car weekend. I was just there yesterday with my child, and today was my girl and child again, because vintage cars, right? Even a 4-year-old loves vintage cars, like nothing like Ferrari, Lamborghini, Porsche, Alfa, Ford, and stuff. Like, other people polish the stuff, repair the stuff, and ironically, we have the same vintage and retro in computing. Like, just look at other YouTubers with 2 million subscribers of lazy game reviews and console wars and Lady Decade or modern vintage gamer and retro cave there. RMC also. 8-bit guy, right? Ironically, I don't even share the passion of 8-bit stuff, because when I grew up, like, I already, as a kid, didn't like the 8-bit stuff because it was so even more limited than, like, even as a kid, I wanted a little bit more graphic OMs. I don't even share the 8-bit passion, because I'm at least a 16-bit guy, but, like, oh, give me more bits. But I can appreciate, like, all the Adrian's digital basement and stuff. Even this new something Japanese, like electronic Okisho, so Lord guy there with his Centurion, if not PDP, whatnot, micro and other vacuum tube stuff. I mean, that's not my, like, I like my bits at least 16-bit or whatnot, and not like vacuum tubes. But hey, there are people who restore vacuum computing things. While that is not my passion, I can appreciate, like, hey, they restore vacuum tube computer things and hawk drives and stuff. It's like, it's not my thing, but, like, have you seen that? And it's at least cool, I guess we can all agree. And Linux kernel developers, no, we delete it. And, like, totally, as I hopefully make clear, without a reason. There is absolutely no gain except, like, shit isn't working anymore. Like, who would not want an operating system? And again, the cost is next to zero, and that is, last but not least, again, the cost is next to zero because just leave it there. Like, deleting it is more work than just leaving it there and touching it a little bit. Like, there does not even need to be a warranty. There is no warranty anyway. Just, can we not, like, why is it not the default, like, we let stuff in preservation state of, we don't make promises? Like, if this would be my kernel, I mean, first of all, I would, like, I hope one day I have enough time and money, like maybe Patreon, shall I subscribe. Maybe we need a Linux vintage code restoration foundation here to actually do cool stuff. In my microkernel, I would actually be with pride supporting this stuff, like first class, like this is a simple hardware. Like, I would, in my microkernel, get this working first because it's so simple, you can do this in a weekend. And the Linux foundation stays, while I would argue the costs are next to zero. Actually, okay, next to zero, I mean just SED. I would even argue it doesn't even need to be buildable. Like market broken, and people who want to build it built with broken stuff and patch it a little bit, like patching it a little bit, like tree-wide substituting it and having vintage, like market behind vintage or broken, and let people build it. But like, what is this attitude to delete it? It makes, in my opinion, like totally no sense. And this glorified news of simpler and cleaner and what? Like, for what? You're not running this code. You don't even need to freaking build it. Again, so I also, like, ideally I would finally also each poll microkernel, each poll on my channel. Yes, microkernel, more microkernel. Like, I wish I would have time if I wouldn't need to undelete Itanium, undelete Airport, and undelete everything else in between. Like, what is zero cost makes a huge cost for me, because I need to sit here and revert all this shit and make. Of course, now it still applies cleanly, but of course, comes time the stuff will not apply cleanly anymore, right? And then it's cost, instead of just building, it becomes increasingly costly. Probably need to make really a true Linux or open source foundation, because the crazy thing is, they have some 100 significant revenue totaling approximately. So the Linux kernel organization in 2023, according here to support summaries, I would use their support, but their PDF is always, I didn't instantly find it, and then it's harder to read. So according to other summaries of the Linux kernel foundation and what I've seen previously, the year before it was 200 million, now it's 260 whatever million. However, its expenses for the same year were even higher, amounting to, like, somehow the Linux foundation manages to spend 269 freaking million. Of course, they only spent 3% on the Linux kernel. I said it before, like, can they not even AAA amazingly? So I said this before, the Linux kernel foundation, you've seen this in their own stats. They have here only 3% or so on Linux kernel, right? Like everything else, they spend 97% on random bullshit, because they are the random bullshit foundation. Like, I said it before, if just they would spend another % or two, like ideally, in my opinion, the Linux Foundation should spend 90+% on Linux, but like, hey, it would be cool if they spend at least 5 or 10%, not like just 3.7 or whatnot. Like, hey, Linux kernel too, it decreased to 2%. Linux kernel, Linux Foundation, 2% Linux kernel. It's like, I would argue with 270 millions, but that is of course not what the paying members want, like AMD and Huawei and Microsoft and Facebook and Samsung and who knows what their amazing paying vendors are. I said it before, right? In my opinion, huge corporate financial scam of not really Linux Foundation, but spreading corporate wealth to strange corporate projects foundation. Like, imagine what the state of the Linux desktop would be if they would spend 200 something millions on Linux and desktop and stuff. And I would argue, besides this, is nearly zero cost. I would even argue if they would have just one full-time position of keeping vintage, like one, maybe someone who likes vintage and retro, like myself or you. I'm not even applying, right? I have my company, I have my YouTube channel, but I'm only saying, but I mean, maybe that would be a good thing and we could sit here and do cool stuff. But like, maybe the Linux kernel foundation would rather fund my microkernel than work on the Linux kernel, probably ironically. But I would argue one full-time position, this is nearly zero cost, right? But one full-time position, just testing old stuff, would even, instead of keeping it like building, which is probably next to zero cost, but could make this old vintage and retro stuff even greater, like with a little bit testing and so on, because we found ourselves not only they regressed PS3 storage, they broke the SGIO2 frame buffer, they broke the Sun TG6. Ironically, those drivers are still in there, right? I shouldn't say this a lot, because the only working in T2 Linux, because of course it is, SGIO2 frame buffer, the driver is upstream. The driver is not deleted. The driver is upstream and broken. PS3 storage, the driver is upstream, and because they touched it, the Linux kernel developers cleaned it up and broke it. And then they didn't even apply my patch immediately, because like, can you send it slightly different? And I wasn't in the mood yet of resending it. Like, if you tell me send a little bit different, like, yeah, okay, next month maybe. I have a company to run a YouTube channel. The Sun TG6, the QLX storage, the fiber channel storage from a decade ago in some sense, broken 3 times or 4 times. I fixed it 3 times or 4 times in the last years alone. The drivers are still there, so much too. And the drivers are still there, are partially broken, and the drivers that are working, they delete. Because I have no further questions. This is just absolutely ridiculously stupid, and this argument makes me depressive. I totally don't get this, and also that some allegedly pro-Linux news sites shout this out as amazing. Here usually as long story short, something wireless shopping blog given they are also it's given they're unmaintained. It's like they're working. They are unmaintained because like for a decade you only had to fix a small API thing or stuff. Like what argument? So this is it is like throwing up. You have your basement full of vintage wine and you dump it in a container because it's freaking vintage. It's unmaintained because it's, I don't know. It's like you have a Corvette Stingray from probably the Apollo program or whatnot, some Apollo Stingray, and you crush it because it's unmaintained sitting in your garage or whatnot, or like your father's garage or whatnot. Or like you inherit a Apollo program Corvette Stingray or whatnot, whatever they were given, and you crush it because like nobody has driven it in 10 years or whatnot. It's like this hurts. It is so stupid. Also, to have a maintenance burden, like what? Like this, it was working. The only maintenance burden is when the big work is they restructure network stuff and they rename shit just to rename shit, to have something to do and to have IBM and Red Hat pay their salary to rename stuff to the 10th time because stable APIs are probably super difficult in a bloody kernel. Like, that you don't need to substitute some bloody API call. Like that is a maintenance burden. When you do other core stuff that you spend 99% of the time on just to change something, to prove your employer, hey, Google, I do something, IBM, I deserve a payroll for changing stuff. Like, it's not a burden if it's just the driver that sits there and it just works until you break it with some other changes. And even then, some hobbyist comes along and patches it with a line or two. I mean, that is the level of... I probably revert some more. We can go over to Twitch. So like I'm surprised that it just worked. Like I reverted it. I went out to the classic days here in Berlin. I looked at some Corvette and Ferrari with and they even had a probably one in Germany only Volkswagen SP2 because they were built only in Brazil, right? And like a DeLorean, like do you crush your freaking DeLorean just because it's a slow piece of shit from 1990 whatnot, 2 or 4, 3 or whatnot? Like no freaking, you just polish your bloody DeLorean and maybe sometimes drive it, or hopefully maybe more often or whatnot. It's so it built without freaking error. I came back, hey, I booted, like it's zero, it's so zero cost. I could walk in the sunshine and came back and it's working. Like so zero freaking cost it is. It is bizarrely, we live in this strange, the Star Trek Next Generation episodes with, I always hated those parallel universe stuff where everything is strange. Like this is how in this crazy days I feel like living, like where this parallel universe where people make strange arguments that make no sense and yet some believe it and hail and praise it, and it's like at the end of the day nothing works anymore because the working stuff is deleted. Madness. Bizarre. Share, like, subscribe. Don't forget to super thank and Patreon and stuff. I could maybe not be happier because, like, you know what, Linux kernel developers break your shit. We just reverted. I'm just torn between. Ideally, I would finally want to continue with my microkernel, but you delete so much stuff. Like the only time you waste is mine. I could not be happier though. Like at the end of the day, T2 is a Linux distribution where stuff works. Like you can increasingly advertise the truly best Linux distribution for vintage and retro because everywhere else it's freaking deleted. So go try to do Linux, the last Linux distribution where shit is working because we don't delete everything and undelete everything. And yeah, the only sad thing is it's my time. The good thing is I get the YouTube video out of it. And the better thing is in T2 increasingly is the last Linux distribution where everything works, apparently. I just, for my own fulfillment, would like to write a microkernel. And so the only thing is, like, should we fork the Linux kernel and like undelete all the stuff and see what happens? Or, I mean, the only thing is, I would rather do something else with my time, right? But otherwise, like, alternative Linux kernel with every cool stuff restored? Share, like, subscribe, leave in the comments below. Do we need to make a poll? Although most polls say microkernel, because in my microkernel, I would rather maintain that in my microkernel than maintaining it in this rather out of bounds critical single address space, easily oopsing kernel written in C or so. Let's go over to Twitch. We have some more things to revert. Probably we need to create some infrastructure, like if not as a true Linux kernel fork, which, I mean, hey, ironically, if we would, my previous video, right, cancelled by mainstream media because nobody wants to report about our cool stuff. Ironically, if we would fork the Linux kernel, restoring Vintage and Retro and Itanium, probably that would finally get, even if it would be just some weekend or summer stunt of, you know, the usual stuff, big news, someone does something and it's a one-time fly and nothing else happens ever again. Like, probably if we just would announce it, that probably would be newsworthy worldwide compared to our T2, everything just working, all architecture supported Linux. Yeah, it's too complicated. I don't get it. It's not newsworthy. That's the sad thing, right? Everything else is newsworthy. Like, literally every deletion, PCMCIA, Wi-Fi, Itanium, every deletion is more newsworthy industry-wide than the Linux distribution, the last Linux distribution you will ever need, because everything and every CPU is supported. So yeah, let's go over to Twitch and undelete some more stuff, because I only tested one. I didn't expect this to just work. So yeah, let's go to Twitch, do some more work, because that's what open source lunatics do. On the weekend, when they found their hardware deleted. Let's take a look at the comments. As always, I also read them later, so if you watch this in the archive, make sure to share, like, and subscribe. What else do we have here? Welcome there. ThinkPad. It really works fine on a ThinkPad. Which one? And also, these are the most, like, I mean, deleting one unused driver is one thing, but like deleting the most popular from, like, you really don't want people with their second and third old system hardware, like, to sometimes play with them, right? Like, second over what? They will do their parts graduate from university. Time to write our own. Yes, of course it is. If I just would have time and enough financing, like if we would imagine what we could do with financing, like the Linux Foundation. I'm not the only one still let down. Linux removed console. Yeah, I mean, even freaking console scrollback is a disgrace. It's a ridiculous, like, yeah, Usagi Electronic. Yeah, exactly. And so many cool Vintage and Retro, and I mean, obviously Vintage and Retro is cool, right? Think PS1, PS2, PS3, Amiga 500, like basically everything not 8-bit. Like everything greater 8-bit, like all the cool stuff, like where graphics looked amazing, like Amiga 500 and 600 and 1200. You know, or they need to be fork of Linux at some point, not even. And also, like, if we would, that's also the problem, last but not least, this is only a problem, mostly a problem, because of the Linux kernel insisting in kernel drivers and constantly breaking the ABI. If the Linux kernel would have, like Windows or macOS, a stable ABI that would last for a decade at least, the drivers could be out of tree and could be reused. Like, if I would design an operating system, I would design reusable drivers, like on any other commercial operating system. It's just this Linux kernel, like initially 20 years I thought it's cool, like, because one tree and one fixed current picture thing, but like now it becomes more and more a burden of, like, yeah, it's not in tree, like if it's not in tree then it's cursed and constantly broken, so yeah. But then needs to be fork of Linux some point, scrollback, pull from console. Yeah, I probably should, like, the more you share, like, subscribe, the better I can make, like, you see, T2 is now amazing again, finally great again, and now we can do the nice things, like restoring Itanium, restoring Wi-Fi, restoring PCMCIA, restoring also triggers me, because I actually use text virtual console things, and each time I debug something, low-level init stuff, it also totally hate and annoys me that there is no console scrollback. Like, Linux kernel programming, apparently difficult, because like everything's so difficult, nobody can do it. The only thing they can do is like, nah, it's buggy, we delete it. Not like, hey, we fix something. It's like, nah, it's difficult. Like, have you tried debug? Have you tried trying C code in the Linux kernel? Ah, it's so difficult. Even the Linux kernel developers rather delete it than fix scrolling. That you would also, I would argue, even if there's, I mean, it rarely was broken for me in 25 years ever. And I would rather have, I mean, again, it was usually like working, but even if there are small bugs of like you can memory clobber some stuff because text scrolling in C is super difficult or whatnot, I would argue I would rather have something that works most of the time in case I need to debug something low level. It's not like you need to run it 24/7 all the time, right? I would rather have some 99.99% working for debugging purposes than nothing. But yeah, the new Linux kernel motto, like, you don't get vintage drivers and features, you rather get nothing. Sudo revert Wi-Fi. Systemd is replacing sudo now. Yeah, sudo replace systemd. Also corporate funding systemd. Linux kernel dev using latest MacBooks result in this. Can't use Linux kernel to replace old new hardware server among things Linus. Not even just the old stuff, but disconnect between nerds and cool shit and Google employees and Google bug fuzzer 5000 formed thing to remove it. Makes me want to use T2 more. Happy to hear that. Maintained burden when no one maintained it. Yeah, exactly. It was a maintenance, like nobody maintained it, but it was a maintenance burden. It's like a clown. I need a freaking clown head. That is what I need. Like in my opinion, it's so sad. Like, Linux kernel development, especially like the Linux kernel foundation, is a total clown. It's a corporate money wash clown. It's a disgrace for the whole open source community. No need for delirium. It's already digitalized in the Back to the Future. Exactly. Let's crush all the vintage cars because we have a photo of them. What is Linus' comment on the matter? Of course he merges it happily. Linus' take is like, delete all old shit because there are less shit to review and stuff. Like if Linus Torvalds would disagree with this, he wouldn't merge it. He would go away with the deletion with take my hard-earned PCMCIA or Orinoco card out of my cold dead fingers. But Linus Torvalds is like, only the latest and greatest, like old shit delete. That is his stand. I would say so. Probably one day all of the kernel will be deleted due to Rust. Did I post Twitch? Yes. How would you get the news? How would we get the new stuff? And what are you saying? But how would we get the new stuff? And that, what do you mean? You just do the new stuff and make sure the old stuff just keeps working. Anyway, I'm impressed, and the only thing is that I really need you to share, like, and subscribe, and maybe Patreon, because as you see, this becomes increasingly a full-time job as much as Linux kernel people want to delete. Like fighting Linux kernel deletions, increasingly a full-time job. Now I also closed the window because, or did I? What did I do? Or maybe I just moved it to some other. Where did I move that? Where is my? Somewhere darn. What have I done with my YouTube stream window thing? Oh wait, it wasn't a window. It was actually a tab. Or was it? No, it wasn't. Oh, whatever. Where is my live streaming? Here's my live streaming. So let's go over to Twitch, fix some more stuff. And yeah, I really need, right, I wanted to open Patreon and I somehow clicked here some close tab thing in the wrong focus. Because increasingly, yeah, obviously all my commercial income starts to suffer as much as I undelete other people's stuff. So every token of patronage highly appreciated. to keep this dream alive. And leave in the comments below what's your take. Forking Linux kernel out of, I mean, theoretically this could be maintained as out of tree DKMS. The only thing is I'm not the greatest fan of out of tree DKMS. IPX got modularized by few similar users on GitHub. You mean IPX, the network protocol? Yeah. I mean, it could be more maintained out of tree, just not the greatest fan of that. For me, it's easiest to just maintain revert patches in T2. But leave in the comments below, forking Linux kernel with a vintage restore tree out of tree DKMS stuff, or just microkernel or YOLO, whatever. Are you team vintage and retro or latest and greatest? Only ironically, the latest and greatest stuff is the most broken for me, right? Think USB-C, alt mode, Steam Deck, and MST, multi-stream technology. Each boot, something else is cursed. So, should I subscribe? Maybe token of appreciation there, and otherwise, see you over on Twitch for some more reverts because I like my hardware working. Have a good day and night. Maybe patch some things and catch you next time for all the next good stuff to come.